Hello and welcome to the Mythic Archive. When we talk about the monster slayers of Greek mythology, the same names always rise to the top. We speak of Heracles and his raw strength. We speak of Perseus and his magical weapons. We speak of Theseus and his cunning. But there is one name that is often whispered or forgotten entirely. A hero who achieved a feat so impossible that he should be the most famous man in the ancient world. He was the man who tamed the wind itself. He was the man who killed a monster that even the gods feared. His name was Bellerophon. But Bellerophon is not a typical hero. His story is not a tragedy of fate like Oedipus, nor is it a triumph like Perseus. It is a tragedy of character. It is the story of a man who had everything: beauty, skill, divine favor, and the most magnificent creature in mythology as his companion, and threw it all away because he did not know his place. Today, I want to open the archive on the man who flew too close to the sun long before Icarus was even born. This is the complete story of Bellerophon, the Chimera, and the terrible price of hubris. Like many great Greek heroes, Bellerophon's story begins with a crime. He was born a prince of Corinth, the son of King Glaucus. He was gifted with incredible beauty and athletic skill, but his life as a prince ended the moment he committed the one sin that stains a man forever in the eyes of gods and men. He killed his own brother. The ancient texts vary on the details. Some say it was an accident during a hunt, while others say it was a fit of jealous rage. But the result was the same. He had killed his kin. In ancient Greece, this marked you with miasma, a spiritual pollution that was contagious. You could not rule, you could not pray, and you could not even enter a home while you carried this stain. He was stripped of his titles and exiled from Corinth. He was forced to wander the earth as a beggar until he could find a king willing to perform the sacred rituals to cleanse him. This is the foundation of his character. He is a man constantly running from his past, desperate to prove his worth to wash away his sins. He eventually found sanctuary in the city of Tiryns. King Polydectes took pity on the young exile. Polydectes was a man of honor. He performed the sacred rites, washed the blood from Bellerophon's hands, and welcomed him into his palace as a guest. For a moment, it seemed Bellerophon's life was back on track. He had a home, he had a patron, but he was cursed with a second problem. He was too handsome. The king's wife, Queen Stheneboa, saw the young hero and fell instantly, dangerously in lust with him. She approached him in secret while the king was away. She offered him her bed. Bellerophon was now in a terrible position. To sleep with her would be to betray the king who had saved his soul. It would be a violation of Xenia, the sacred law of hospitality which was protected by Zeus himself. So Bellerophon, being a man of honor, made the moral choice. He refused her. He rejected the queen. But as the saying goes, hell has no fury like a woman scorned. Stheneboa was humiliated. Terrified that Bellerophon might tell her husband what she had done, she decided to strike first. She tore her own robes. She scratched her own face to make it look like a struggle. She ran to King Polydectes crying and claimed that Bellerophon had tried to force himself on her. King Polydectes was enraged. He wanted to kill Bellerophon on the spot. But he was trapped by the very same laws of hospitality that Bellerophon had respected. You cannot kill a guest who has eaten at your table. It would bring down the wrath of the Furies upon your house. Polydectes was caught between his rage as a husband and his duty as a host. So he devised a cowardly, devious plan. He would not kill Bellerophon himself. He would send him to someone who could. He called Bellerophon to him. He smiled a fake smile. He asked the hero to do him a favor. He asked him to deliver a sealed tablet to his father-in-law, King Iobates, in the distant land of Lycia. Bellerophon, eager to please his host and completely unaware of the betrayal, accepted the mission. He took the tablet. He did not know that he was carrying his own death warrant. Inside the sealed wood were scratched secret signs that read, "Pray remove the bearer of this letter from this world, for he has attempted to violate my wife." Bellerophon set off on a long journey, protecting the very message that was intended to end his life. This motif, the Bellerophontic letter, is one of the oldest tropes in literature, a symbol of ultimate betrayal. Bellerophon arrived in Lycia after a long journey. King Iobates, the father of the Lying Queen, welcomed him. And here we see the tragedy of Greek manners repeating itself. Iobates feasted Bellerophon for 9 full days. They sacrificed oxen, they drank wine. Only on the morning of the 10th day did Iobates ask to see the letter of introduction. He opened the tablet, he read the command, "Kill this man." Iobates was horrified. He had just shared salt and bread with this man for 9 days. He could not kill a guest any more than Proetus could. But he could not disobey a fellow king and his own son-in-law. Iobates needed a way to kill Bellerophon without raising his own hand against him. He needed an accident. He needed a suicide mission. And as it happened, Lycia had a monster that needed killing. "If you are truly a hero," Iobates said, "do me a service. There is a beast terrorizing my borders, a creature of divine origin, born of the mother of monsters, Echidna, the Chimera." This was not a normal animal. It was a hybrid nightmare. It had the front of a lion, the middle of a goat, and the tail of a serpent. And the worst part was not its claws or its fangs. It was that the creature breathed pure, unquenchable fire. No man could get close to it without being incinerated. Iobates knew this. He was sending Bellerophon to burn. Bellerophon, bound by his honor and perhaps a bit of arrogance, accepted the challenge. But he was smart enough to know he could not fight this thing on foot. He needed an advantage. He needed a miracle. Before he marched to his death, Bellerophon sought the counsel of the local seer, Polydectes. The seer told him the truth. "You cannot fight the Chimera from the ground. You need the advantage of the air. You need Pegasus." Pegasus was the winged horse that had sprung from the severed neck of Medusa years before. He was wild, untamed, and roamed the clouds. No man had ever sat on his back. The seer told Bellerophon to sleep in the temple of Athena, the goddess of wisdom. That night, Athena appeared to him in a dream. She didn't give him a weapon. She gave him a tool. She placed a golden bridle into his hands. "Violence will not tame the divine horse," she whispered. "Only this will." Bellerophon woke up, and the golden bridle was real, heavy in his hands. He had the tool. Now he just had to find the horse. Bellerophon went to the spring of Perrine, the favorite drinking spot of the winged horse. He waited in the bushes for days until he finally saw it. Pegasus descended from the clouds like a bolt of white lightning. The creature was wild, untamed, and powerful enough to kick a man's skull in. But Bellerophon had the gift of Athena. As the horse lowered its head to drink, Bellerophon stepped out. He did not use a lasso or a whip. He simply held out the golden bridle. The magic of the goddess took hold instantly. The wild stallion, which had never known the touch of a man, bowed its head and allowed Bellerophon to slip the bit into its mouth. In that moment, the balance of power shifted. Bellerophon mounted the horse, and for the first time in human history, a man looked down upon the world from the clouds. He was ready for the monster. He flew to the canyon where the Chimera dwelt. From above, he saw the beast in all its horror. The lion head roared, the goat head bleated, and the snake tail hissed. The creature unleashed a torrent of flame that turned the rocks to slag. But Bellerophon had the ultimate tactical advantage. He had air superiority. Every time the Chimera lunged or breathed fire, Pegasus simply banked away, soaring out of range. Bellerophon circled the beast, frustrating it, peppering it with arrows. But he knew that arrows would not kill a creature of this power. He needed a killing blow. He needed to get close. And he had prepared a special weapon for this exact moment. He had tipped his spear not with bronze or iron, but with a large block of solid lead. He waited for the chimera to open its lion jaws to release another blast of fire. In that split second, Bellerophon dove. He urged Pegasus straight into the heat. As the monster roared, Bellerophon thrust his spear deep into the creature's throat. He didn't try to pierce the heart. He simply lodged the block of lead inside the fiery gullet. The heat of the chimera's own breath melted the lead instantly. The molten metal poured down the monster's throat, searing its insides and filling its lungs. The beast suffocated on its own fire and the molten metal. It thrashed, it clawed the earth, and then it fell silent. Bellerophon had done the impossible. He had slain the chimera not with brute strength, but with physics and courage. He returned to King Iobates, expecting praise. But the king was terrified. The letter said this man had to die, and yet he had killed a monster. Iobates decided that if a monster couldn't kill Bellerophon, then an army would. He sent the hero on a new mission against the Solymi, the fiercest and most brutal tribe in the mountains. Bellerophon simply flew above them and rained death from the sky. They couldn't touch him. When he returned victorious again, Iobates sent him against the Amazons, the warrior women who had never been defeated. Again, Bellerophon used the sky. He destroyed their ranks without ever setting foot on the ground. He was becoming a god of war, untouchable and undefeated. King Iobates was now desperate. He realized that open warfare would not work. He selected his own palace guard, the bravest and strongest men in Lycia, and set an ambush in a narrow canyon on Bellerophon's road back to the city. This was a trap that Pegasus could not fly out of easily. But Bellerophon was no longer just a rider. He was a hardened killer. He dismounted and slaughtered the assassins in close quarters. He killed every single one of them. When he walked back into the palace, covered in the blood of the king's own men, he did not bow. He stared the king in the eye. The game was up. Iobates finally realized the truth. This man was not a villain. He was protected by the gods. No mortal could survive the Chimera, the Solymi, the Amazons, and the ambush unless the Olympians willed it. The king showed Bellerophon the sealed tablet. Bellerophon read the lie. He explained the truth about Queen Sthenoboa's treachery. Iobates believed him. Overcome with awe and regret, the king offered Bellerophon half of his kingdom and the hand of his daughter Philonoe in marriage. Bellerophon had won. He had cleared his name. He had a kingdom, a wife, and the greatest steed in the world. He had reached the absolute pinnacle of human success. And this is where the story usually ends for other heroes. They live happily ever after. But Bellerophon's story is a tragedy of character. He ruled for years. He had children. He had wealth. But peace was not enough for him. He looked at his winged horse. He looked at the sky. He started to think dangerous thoughts. I have done what no other man has done, he told himself. I have defeated the monsters of the gods. I fly above the world like a god. Why should I live down here with mortals? Why should I die like a man? The praise of the people had poisoned his mind. He began to believe that he belonged on Olympus. He believed he was equal to Zeus himself. One morning, he made the fatal decision. He put on his armor. He mounted Pegasus. And he did not steer the horse toward a battle. He steered him upward, straight toward the home of the gods. Bellerophon urged Pegasus higher than they had ever gone before. The air grew thin and cold. The earth below shrank to a speck. He was no longer fighting monsters to save people. He was invading the home of the gods to satisfy his own ego. He believed he was worthy to sit at the table of Zeus. He believed he had earned immortality through the edge of his spear. But Pegasus, the divine horse, knew better. The animal could sense the transgression. It could feel the wrongness of the path. Yet it obeyed its master's hand on the golden bridle. They breached the cloud layer. The blinding golden palaces of Olympus came into view. Bellerophon smiled. He thought he had won the ultimate prize, but Zeus was watching. The king of the gods did not need to throw a thunderbolt. He did not need to summon an army. He saw a mortal man trying to force his way into heaven, and he decided to deal with him not as a threat, but as a pest. Zeus did not send a monster, he sent a gadfly, a tiny, stinging insect. It was a punishment that fit the crime perfectly. Bellerophon thought he was a god, but he was about to be brought down by the smallest creature in existence. The gadfly buzzed down from the peak. It found the soft flesh under Pegasus's tail, and it stung. Pegasus reared in sudden pain. The horse bucked violently, twisting in the air. Bellerophon, caught by surprise, lost his grip on the golden bridle. Gravity, which he thought he had conquered, reclaimed him. He fell. He fell from the threshold of Olympus. He plummeted through the clouds, screaming, watching his divine horse fly away without him. It was a long fall, a fall that gave him plenty of time to realize the magnitude of his mistake. He crashed back to the earth, but the gods were cruel. They did not let him die. Death would have been a mercy. Instead, he landed in a thorn bush. He survived the fall, but he was broken. His body was crippled. His eyes were blinded by the thorns. He landed in the Alean field, the field of wandering, and there he stayed. The king of Lycia, the slayer of the chimera, the rider of the wind, was now a blind, lame beggar. He wandered alone, avoiding the paths of men. He was hated by the gods. He was shunned by humanity. The ancient texts say he wandered there until the end of his days, devouring his own soul. It is the most pathetic end of any Greek hero. He did not die in battle like Achilles. He did not die a king like Theseus. He died a nobody, lost in an empty field, consumed by the memory of who he used to be. But what of Pegasus? The horse did not fall. Pegasus continued to fly upward, entering the gates of Olympus. Zeus accepted the horse. He gave Pegasus a stall in the divine stables, and he gave him a new job. Pegasus became the carrier of the thunderbolts. Whenever Zeus wanted to hurl lightning, it was Pegasus who brought the bolts to him. The horse achieved what the rider could not. He became an immortal servant of the gods. Bellerophon's story serves as the ultimate warning against hubris. It teaches us that no matter how great our achievements, no matter how many monsters we slay, we are still mortal. We must know our limits. Bellerophon reached for the heavens, and for a moment he touched them. But he forgot that he was a man. And in the end, the earth reclaimed him, not as a king, but as a cautionary tale whispered by travelers who avoid the lonely fields where a blind old man weeps for the wings he lost.